Welcome to the Decent People podcast, a production of Decential Media, where we're committed to telling the stories of the founders, builders, and visionaries who are creating a new decentralized economy and internet experience. You guys know it as Web3 or blockchain, and we're going to bring you the smartest and most interesting people in the space for intimate conversations that reveal their background, how they got into crypto in the first place, and what they're doing today to make a decentralized future a reality. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure to check out our site at decential.io. Now, to the show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Decent People podcast by Decential Media. I'm your host, Stephen Ladden. This week, we're with Tino Vivo, the CEO and founder of the Web3 venture studio, Kollectiff. Tino, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited about what we're doing. I want people to find out more about Kollectiff and the work that we do here.
Well, just in case people aren't aware, what exactly is Kollectiff and what is the work that you guys do?
Great. Okay, let me get into it little by little. So Kollectiff operates at the intersection of Web3, the Metaverse, and advertising. We created an ecosystem of interconnected verticals that take you from IRL to the Metaverse. IRL, for those that don't know, the lingo for in real life. So we essentially have on one side of the business the agency side of things. We help brands understand Web3 and get into Web3, the Metaverse. We do that, we did it with Acura, the car brand. We managed to do a kind of an experiential marketing campaign where we mix, generative NFTs that were pegged to the pre-order of the car, the new Integra that it just came out. And then we recreated, a virtual dealership in Decentraland full of, gamification and a space where people could enter and find out more about, the upcoming release of the Integra. Seeing out animated features of the car, interactive elements, and also, of course, a quest that rewarded commerce with, exclusive NFTs and whatnot. And that is an example of kind of what we do for brands in terms of, the Web3 strategy, understanding what they want to achieve, and then, helping them execute their campaign.
Did you have a background in branding, advertising prior, or did you ever, how did you get into the Web3 space to begin with? Was that a goal? How did it all come about?
I grew up a musician. I've been a musician and a creative my whole life. And I discovered crypto back in 2013. I was at that point in time, I was recording music in Austin, Texas, and I had just finished my summer performance program in Berklee College of Music, and I found out about Bitcoin, right? And the thought of it, I didn't understand it back then, but something stuck, And then I ended up moving to Austin, Texas to pursue my music career with Willie Nelson's band and some other, country musicians. And of course, my parents were gonna let me just go to Austin and do my music. So I had to get, of course, a degree. And so I ended up studying business with a focus on digital media. And that's where kind of my brand digital media side came on. And I worked in different, marketing media roles throughout, college and after college. But it was in the freshman year of college that my suite mates were experimenting with crypto and using it, to operate in the deep web. And I started kind of becoming obsessed with it. And I entered into a, multi-year rabbit hole of just research. I started a small crypto fund for friends and family. Back then, we managed around we managed around $1 million in assets, which is small, but anyways. So I entered into a rabbit hole. I started researching. I started exploring with, running masternodes, mining coins. This was 2016, 17. And back then I had, I think, 25 grand, to my name. And I thought, in order to kind of have skin in the game and better understand this, I need to be kind of fully invested, And so I went all in back in 2016. Everything I had, I invested in crypto, mainly Bitcoin, Ethereum, some others as well. But since then, I just, I've been in the space. I've been to, the Bitcoin conference since 2016. It used to be small. Now it's a parade. So I've been around, never as a builder, more as a researcher and as an investor. But I've always been on the wait to see where I could fit into the picture, because I'm not a computer science guy, so I'm not gonna end up building a protocol from scratch, coding the whole thing. But I am a creative and I understand media. And so when the convergence of media and blockchain came together with the boom of NFTs in 2020, that was kind of my cue, or this is where I get in. This is where I get in, and I start building. And the premise for Kollectiff, just when we started, pre-angel, pre-anything, just an idea. It was, we were collecting NFTs back then, and we were using OpenSea, and the whole experience and the content, everything was, very, it still is, but more back then. It was very clunky, and we thought, NFTs are here to stay for sure. I believe in, the future of digital assets, virtual scarcity, digital ownership, and provenance in the blockchain for digital assets. But I could not feel like brands were gonna launch, or any reputable brand was gonna launch an NFT campaign via OpenSea, right? No one was gonna drop there, and even not brands, but no one was launching projects on OpenSea. OpenSea was a secondary market, so we had the idea of doing kind of like a Shopify for NFTs, which was a storefront deployment platform. And we started, pursuing that, had the white paper done. And, by the end of the white paper, Shopify announces that they're doing NFTs. And then that, we paused a little bit and reanalyzed. And by that time, we had researched everything that we needed to know about kind of the user journey, the collector's journey, and kind of the brand's journey from both sides of the coin. But we didn't experience what it was like to launch an NFT project, to go through that process of creating the media, putting it in IPFS, minting the smart contracts, all of that thing. So we paused there and we said, okay, in order to fully kind of understand the picture, we need to launch an NFT project. And if we're going to launch an NFT project, it needs to be something that hasn't been done before. We need to come up to this space where, it's JPEGs mostly, dubious utility and all of that. We need to come up with something different and kind of new. And we were greatly inspired by, Artifact back then, which were, in our eyes, the only guys doing it right, with high quality media, amazing, customer journey, user experience. And so we wanted to mimic a little bit what Artifact had done, but kind of do it not as a one-of-one basis, kind of like Artifact has done before Clonex, but do, a generative wearable project, right? And so we created the first generative wearable project in the NFT space, and we launched it October last year, which was the Metaverse travel agency. We created a series of 5,600 helmets that were assembled in 3D using, different rarity, like we know. And we developed this, custom algorithm that help us assemble, those into what they are, right? And we took the first step to make it usable in Decentraland, and now we're optimizing those to go to Sandbox, and then I cannot mention the next one that we're going to launch in yet, but we're launching in another one. So the idea is to have one asset with multiple use cases in multiple platforms, instead of you holding an asset and then we are dropping you the version of of Decentraland that it's going to be useful for you, right? And dropping you the next version of a Sandbox wearable. We want the mother asset to be able to unlock your wearable in game, right? So you have one asset, and this asset is interoperable in terms of metaverse interoperability, right? So that was kind of the goal with the MTA, and that's what we're still doing on the side of our brand and agency work. And we also, on that line, of proprietary projects like that, the projects that we have in the pipeline, which we kind of do this every now and then, have, projects that they start as an idea and hole in the market of something that either we haven't seen or no one has attempted to do, and that's kind of what we want to do, right? We want to, bring new things to the medium, right, and kind of explore NFT projects with utility and with kind of how do you call it? With dynamics that haven't been explored before. We have one with machine learning and artificial intelligence that we want to do. That it's probably going to come out in the next 2 months. We have another one that it's kind of like a collect to earn experience. So we have some proprietary projects that are like research and development type things that we are trying to explore new tech with the projects that we build in house, and then we help brands on the other side. And a lot of the learnings that we're doing, a lot of the learnings that we're having by doing these proprietary projects, then we pass on to the work we do for brands, right? Because our technical team, it's fantastic, and they're coming up with, they want to explore stuff, right? They're trying to come up with new standards for smart contracts, and not new standards, but ways we can use the existing standards to do something new, right? Like an NFT that comes with another NFT, and whenever you move one, the other one moves with it, for example. That's one that we have that we're going to launch. So stuff like that, and encrypted NFTs, which hasn't been done before. We're developing kind of a standard for encrypted NFTs. So that is on the margins of what we do, more on the research and development side. And kind of going back to what Kollectiff is, right? That was your first question. Is this ecosystem of 3 different pillars. On one side, the agency, which I went over. The other side is the gallery, which is the space I'm in right now, which is a Web3 hub in the heart of Venice, California. We're bringing people building and creating and investing in Web3 into the space, and we want this space to become kind of an IRL Web3 hub here in LA. Also, as a way to kind of approach brands and consumers in a tangible way, and kind of correlate the digital with a physical, right? And the last part, which is kind of where I spend most of my time, is in research and innovation, where we use the learnings to develop software that automate what we do, or gives us more scale. And in that very funny feed loop that we've identified, where we launch a brand to the metaverse, we have some learnings and discover pain points, and then we build software to fix those pain points, and then we offer the software to the brands and the clients that we have. That's a nice feedback loop. And thanks to that feedback loop, we've managed to build some really amazing software that cannot speak too much about, but it's going to come up soon.
That's awesome.
I was advised by my PR ninjas that
not to divulge too much.
Exactly, yeah, not to say anything that's not to go into upcoming.
It's interesting, the feedback loop you mentioned, and I wonder how much of being an artist yourself allows you the perspective to know how to best handle brands, creatives, stuff like that. Like what does your artist background give to all 3 of those verticals?
That's a great question, and I'm the guy on those calls with the brands, coming up with the crazy ideas of how to communicate what they want to communicate. On one side, I understand what the technology allows us to do. I'm not technical, like I said, but I understand conceptually how much we can push it. What's the limitations of this technology, and by establishing those parameters, I'm able to play freely within this play zone, right? And I believe kind of my creative past allows me to think outside the box in terms of how to communicate creative concepts. And I love doing so. I love helping brands kind of come up with new ways to feature their projects and their products. And Web3 allows for a different instance of that, because launching an NFT project is synonym to starting a tokenized community, right? That's inherently someone that holds an asset in your collection. It's part of your community. And how do you manage that community? I'm not talking about Discord community managers. I'm talking about how the value of that relationship is explored. That is something I'm a fanatic of, and those are part of the tools that we're building, so that these brands can better manage that relationship between token holder and token creator through airdrop management systems, etc.
Well, it sounds like your ability to innovate and your innovating eye that could be applied to the more, some might say, creative realm of music is then being just redirected to these conversations with brands and these conversations with other clients and companies to take their visions for their products and put them into the metaverse and into Web3 technology in a really interesting way.
But precisely. And what we're seeing, right, with working with brands at these very early stages, the brand activations that most brands are doing right now are kind of a first step, right? They're getting their feet wet. They're experimenting with these new platforms, with these new technologies. They're not going full in, they're not adopting Web3 holistically. And so, that is what I want us to go to eventually, mapping up the Web3 strategy holistically, long-term, with all of the software in place to be able to manage that, right? Because infrastructure right now in that side of things it's not permitting for companies to have, Web3 inherent in their day-to-day. But they're using this as a first step to kind of understand, the new platforms, the new technology, and the next step is going to be bigger, and then bigger until they just cannot deny it, that it's a force of nature and it's here to stay, right?
And what do you think is at the baseline, the bedrock of that belief that the metaverse, Web3 is the future, is here to stay, that it's not just a flash in the pan?
Well, I enter into some debates with some of my pals on this, because we differ somewhat to what I believe the metaverse will be, or why it is valuable, and some others that believe, Fortnite and Roblox is a metaverse. And I respect all views, of course, but in my opinion, if there is no underlining law of ownership, and if you're not the owner of everything you do in the metaverse and the value creation that you're bringing into the platform, if you're not owning that, then it's not a metaverse, it's a game, and that for me is a clear distinction. A metaverse needs to be, Web3 in essence. You need to be able to own the assets, not in a, how do you call it? Not the platform as a custodial of, all the activity and the value you're generating and the assets you own, but you yourself need to be an owner, like having, dollar bills in your wallet and being able to have a coffee mug in your possession, right? So I believe that Web3 is what the metaverse needed to become a metaverse, allowing for, peer-to-peer transactions, creating concepts that generate value and automatically get compensated, being able to own scarce digital assets, being able to own your piece of land in which you're building a casino, and then, being able to monetize those experiences. And I believe Web3 is kind of the backbone of what's going to make the metaverse a metaverse.
And so, totally. And so if you understand how to build Web3 technology, are you at an advantage inherently than folks who don't? Do you have a leg into, or a leg above, or a leg up on the future of technology and the internet than those who are just still flummoxed by the word cryptocurrency?
100%. And I'm not saying like we have a leg up. I believe everybody in the space building in Web3 today is years away from whoever can come in the near future. I also believe that what we're seeing right here is not about, NFTs, digital assets, or metaverse, that these all, siloed concepts. I believe this is much more kind of foundational, right? It's a new architecture for the internet, right? Internet, the first iteration, read, right? Second iteration, read write. Third iteration, read write own. And I believe this iteration with distributed ledger technology allows for just unimaginable, new platforms to exist, and a shift in value creation within the internet, right? Let's take, for example, platforms like Facebook, right, where it's a gigantic platform, doesn't produce any content, right? And then you have the user, which generates content, user-generated content. So, and where does that value of all of that content generated by users end up, right? Do they profit from that content, or does the platform really capitalizes on the value that their users are putting? And so, with Web3, that value relation changes dramatically, because now, it changes dramatically in the sense that you don't need a trusted third party, right? You don't need a platform to facilitate that and to capitalize on all of your interactions. Now the value goes to the hands of the creators, to a much larger percentage of that value gets captured by the content creators. And I think that in Facebook's example, it's great, but also think of Uber, right? Where you have drivers and you have a platform. An Uber in Web3 would essentially benefit drivers 10x more, so
Right.
so these companies of the past that are operating in Web2, I think that there's going to be major disruption in the next few years, in the sense of how this value in the internet gets distributed and how these platforms are operating, because we see blockchains and digital assets and Web3 in general just changing the dynamic of how companies in the internet are going to be conceptualized and are going to launch and operate. This is not going to happen from one day, but it's a transition, and I believe we're in the very early days of the next iteration of the internet, where eventually the metaverse will play a big role.
When you're sourcing or approached by potential clients, what do you look for in them in order to understand and to feel confident, okay, hey, we can do a great job for these folks as we're moving forward into that next wave of the internet?
Like I said, most brands don't come with a, first of all, very few really understand Web3 in order to map out a holistic Web3 strategy, multi-year phase, which eventually is going to happen. But right now, these brands, they want to get their feet wet. They want to capitalize on the trend, use all of the buzzwords, being perceived as innovators in marketing, right? So we conduct a lot of experiential marketing campaigns using Web3 and the metaverse. But to your point, we go through an ideation session. We get all of the necessary creative and technical briefs that we need to, and essentially there's two type of clients. One that comes with everything figured out, like this is what we want to do, can you help us? And then we tweak it if necessary, and we execute it. Or those that come to us without a clue of how to incorporate Web3 and the metaverse into their day-to-day strategies or a marketing activation from scratch. So the process for those two differ greatly, right? Because we need to meet them where they're at in terms of Web3 knowledge and metaverse understanding. And also we're partners with Decentraland, with Sandbox, and with another one in the near future that we're going to announce. But we don't necessarily grab a project and put it in Sandbox or Decentraland deliberately. we do kind of an analysis of where you're best suited to be, depending on what you want to accomplish, right? And so we take kind of a research and insight driven approach, and for each brand we kind of, we go through an ideation session and put a lot of research into educating these brands what the best course of action is, right?
With respect to sort of the Hollywood clients that you have, the UTAs, the CAAs, do you guys focus on helping them as companies get into and explore Web3 in the metaverse, or is it more geared toward their own offerings to their own clients?
It's more geared towards their offerings to their talent, right? So we've partnered with them to essentially become their Web3 arm, right? So if there's any of their talents looking to do an activation in Web3 or in the metaverse, or if they have a project that deals with this type of things, that's they come to us, and we help them kind of map out a strategy, and we collaborate with them on those strategies. And they also, use this space as a way to amplify the work that we're doing. So that's why kind of everything is interconnected, because we execute everything digitally, then the physical space to amplify, and so we try to do something digital, physical, right, at that intersection.
It's interesting to think about too. I know we've talked mostly about the future of the internet, the future of Web3. As you mentioned, everything's interconnected. Inherently working with these larger agencies and respectively their talent, that's going to change in some way entertainment as we understand it and know it and consume it. So it's also really cool, I think, to be at that intersection as well.
100%. And I come from a family of media and entertainment. My father, early in .com entrepreneur, I IPO'd 2 companies in the NASDAQ in 1 year. This was back in the 90s. And so I was breastfed with this, internet entrepreneurship. I was breastfed by, with all of this happening, since I was born. And I believe that we're going to see some models in the near future, because I know there's some projects coming out that are doing some sort of what I'm going to mention right now, in which we have 2 types of kind of entertainment digitally, right? Or there's probably more, but let's be kind of qualify them like this. You have, I'm going to watch a movie or a series, or I'm going to play a game, right? I have those 2. We're going to encounter one that sits right in here, where it could be a mix of choose your own adventure type dynamic, but we're also going to see a show that involves digital assets, and that whatever happens in the show gets correlated with your assets. And so you're now holding an aspect of the show that mutates as the show develops, and then giving you a bunch of ways to interact further with the characters, with the content through that asset, via unlockable content, via airdrops. And so I really believe that there's something happening, right in the middle of gaming and, TV consumption, movies, whatnot, that it's kind of not passive and not active, right at the middle. It's like, I don't know how to call it, but someone will come up.
Interactive.
Exactly. Someone will, I promise you, someone will come with a good password. It's going to catch fire in a year.
Oh, for sure. And that will be that new intersection. But for anyone listening to this, that you would have heard the seed of that idea here on this podcast.
Exactly.
And the inspiration for whatever word were that this unnamed term, that's when it hit.
Exactly.
For what you can talk about coming up with the Kollectiff, is there anything you're really excited about in the next couple of years, or even short term, couple months, that again, I understand the PR wizards have advised to walk the line diligently, but for anything upcoming that you're excited about, that you can talk to about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you, I'm not gonna talk about the agency side of things, because there's a lot of the pipeline that we cannot mention. But On the software side of things, and this is proprietary technology, so we can speak freely. We are developing a really interesting Web3 native advertising solution that essentially takes what we do right now to a whole other level of scale and interoperability, and also customization and with very little barriers to entry. Because we don't, every decentralized application or protocol by that matter, you need to have somewhat of Web3 experience, and those are solutions that we would love to launch, but the user is not there right now. And so we're doing something that is Web3 enabled, but feels like a common Web2 advertising solution, with the opportunity to increasingly become more and more Web3 in the future. But essentially, this platform, what it allows us to do is deploy billboards throughout the metaverse and capture data. So we offer that to current advertisers that are spending in Google AdSense, their marketing budgets. This would be their Google AdSense, but for Web3 metaverses. And we're right in the midst of our capital raise in the next 2 months, where we're gonna involve a bunch of really prominent partners and investors into helping us bring our product to the masses.
Excited to see where that takes you guys, and it's definitely it's really neat to hear what you guys are doing on the cutting edge of that intersection of Web3, Metaverse, and really the future of ads and entertainment. So really cool stuff.
We love it. That's why we do it.
Amen. Well, Tino Vivo, thank you so much. This has been another episode of the Decent People podcast by Decentral Media. I'm your host, Stephen Ladden. This has been a great chat with Tino Vivo, CEO and founder of the Kollectiff, the Web3 venture studio. Tino, thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. A pleasure to be here.